Here's a fact that the instant ramen industry has spent decades hoping you would never piece together. That rich, deep, slow-simmered flavor you taste when you crack open a packet of instant ramen, the kind that feels like someone spent hours in a kitchen, was never broth. It was never stock. It was never extracted from anything that ever had a bone attached to it. It is a chemically engineered illusion, designed in a lab, approved by regulators, and sold to you at a markup that has nothing to do with quality. Real ramen broth, the kind served in a legitimate ramen shop in Tokyo and Seoul in New York, takes between 12 and 24 hours to make, sometimes longer. Bones are simmered until they surrender their collagen. Fat emulsifies into the liquid, or aromatics layer on top of each other over time. The result is something genuinely complex, genuinely expensive, and genuinely irreplaceable. Now here is the part that should make you pause. The global instant noodle market is worth over $50 billion annually. $50 billion. And the vast majority of that money is not paying for real ingredients, real broth, or real anything. It is paying for the engineering of a convincing replique and the marketing budget that keeps you from asking questions. Some products on the shelf right now, today, are labeled chicken ramen or beef ramen and contain what amounts to a fraction of a percent of the real protein they advertise. That is not an exaggeration. That is a regulatory loophole with a product name slapped on top of it. Today we are going ingredient by ingredient, brand by brand, and regulation by regulation. We are going to name the brands, cutting the most corners, expose the legal tricks keeping them on the shelf, and this is the part I want you to stay for. Find the few companies still making something that deserves to be called ramen, because one brand on this list completely flipped my expectations, and I almost missed it. To understand how we got here, you need to understand what the industry actually solved and what it sacrificed to do it. Authentic ramen broth is an extraction process. You apply heat to raw materials, bones, cartilage, fat, aromatics, over an extended period of time. And the biological compounds locked inside those materials break down and transfer into the liquid. Collagen becomes gelatin. Proteins denature into free amino acids. Natural glutamates, the compounds responsible for umami are released slowly, building on each other in layers. That process is not cheap. It requires large volumes of raw animal product. It requires time measured in half days, not minutes. It requires refrigeration infrastructure, spoilage control, and logistics that add cost at every step. Run the math, and the cost per serving of even a simplified, real broth sits far above the price point most instant ramen sells at. So the industry did not try to lower the cost of real broth, they replaced it entirely. Under guidelines from the United States Food and Drug Administration and the equivalent international frameworks, food manufacturers are legally permitted to use what is called natural flavors. The category is so broad it can include chemically processed plant extracts, fermented byproducts, and industrially altered proteins. They can use monosodium glutamate, disodium inositol, and disodium guanylate, a trio of compounds that, when combined, mimic the sensation of umami layering without a single bone ever entering the facility. And here is the loophole that makes the labeling work. Under Codex Alimentarius standards, the international food code that governs global trade, a manufacturer can include a trace quantity of a real ingredient and legally use that ingredient's name on the label. A 0.5% chicken powder in a packet that is 99.5% flavor enhancers and salt, still legal, still labeled chicken. This is not an accident, this is a logistical magic trick, and it has been running at scale for decades. Then there is the second shortcut, the noodles. Most instant noodles are deep fried and palm oiled at temperatures between 140 and 160 degrees Celsius. Frying removes moisture faster and cheaper than air drying. It extends shelf life, and it adds fat to the product, which boosts flavor perception cheaply. The downside is oxidized fats, higher calorie density, and a slow rancidity over time that the seasoning packets are specifically engineered to mask. What you are really buying in most cases is not ramen. It is a system, a cost minimization system, designed to simulate ramen as efficiently as the law allows. The skip list. Let us go through the brands that have built their business on that system. These are not accusations. These are ingredients publicly listed on the packages you can pull off the shelf right now. Brand 1, Nissin, cup noodles. Flip the bottle. The packaging promises a hearty chicken flavor. The ingredient list tells a different story. You will find TBHQ, a preservative used to extend the life of frying oil. You will find monosodium glutamate alongside disodium inositol. You will find natural flavors with no disclosed source. The vegetables present in the cups. The small, dehydrated fragments make up a quantity so minimal they function as decoration, not nutrition. What Nissin has built is not a broth, it is a flavor architecture. A layered system of enhancers calibrated to land in the right place on your palate and exit without leaving you anything real. They have faced consumer pressure over their sodium and additive load for years. They have issued reformulations, but the structural economics of the product have not changed. Brand 2, Meerschaum. The label says rich beef flavor. Read the fine print and you will find hydrolyzed corn protein as a primary contributor to that beef taste. Hydrolyzed vegetable protein is a flavor compound produced by breaking down plant protein with acid or enzymes. It releases free glutamates that register as savory on the palate, and it has no beef in it whatsoever. The sodium content runs between 800 and 1,000 milligrams per serving. That is the architecture of a product designed to hit every savory marker on your tongue, while spending as little as possible on real ingredients. This is one of the clearest examples of flavor engineering replacing real cooking currently on the market. Brand 3, Indomie. Indomie has a devoted following, and I understand why. The multi-sachet system, the separate packets of oil or powder or soy sauce and seasoning, creates a layered experience that feels more artisanal than a single powder packet. But flip every one of those sachets over, you will find flavor enhancer E621, E627, E631. You will find sweetened seasoning oils. You will find palm oil fried noodles underneath all of it. The complexity is real, but that complexity is coming from stacking processed flavor layers, not from ingredient quality. Indomie has faced import scrutiny in several countries over additive concerns. The product remains popular because the flavor engineering is genuinely sophisticated. That is precisely the point. Sophisticated engineering designed to compensate for the absence of sophisticated ingredients. Brand 4, Top Ramen. This one is almost admirable in its transparency, not in labeling, but in strategy. Top Ramen is a cost minimization blueprint. Every expensive step has been removed. Every real ingredient has been replaced. The seasoning is maltodextrin heavy, functioning primarily as a bulking agent and flavor carrier. The meat flavors are artificial. The preservatives are in the oil. This product exists to reach the lowest possible price point, and it succeeds. What it does not do is feed you anything resembling the food it is named after. Brand 5, Samyang, the spicy lines. Here's something the viral challenge videos will not tell you. The extreme heat positioning of Samyang's spicy variants is a flavor strategy, not just a product feature. Oleoresin capsicum. Concentrated chili extract activates pain receptors on the tongue and creates a physiological response intense enough to override your assessment of what the base product actually tastes like. Combined with a high sodium and sugar load, the spice is functioning as a distraction mechanism. You are not evaluating the broth, you are surviving it. That is not artisanal heat, that is engineered sensory override. Brand 6, Maggi. Maggi deserves special attention because it operates on something the other brands do not have in quite the same quantity: generational brand trust. Billions of people grew up with Maggi. That trust is real and it is earned through decades of consistent product delivery. But trust is not the same as transparency. The formulation is heavily processed. Refined wheat flour, palm oil, flavor enhancers, additive-loaded seasoning. And the product carries a significant piece of corporate history that consumers should know. Maggi faced a major recall in India in 2015 following concerns over elevated lead content and misleading labeling. The brand recovered, the trust largely returned. But the formulation driving that trust is not the clean, simple product the marketing implies. The kitchen test. Before we get to the brands doing this right, I want to give you a tool you can use tonight with whatever ramen is in your pantry. 4 tests, no lab required. Cook your noodles normally, then pull the bowl away from the heat and let the broth sit undisturbed for 10 minutes. Watch what happens to the surface. If a thick, defined layer of oil separates cleanly and rises to the top, you're looking at fried noodles and added flavor oil. The twin signatures of lower cost production. Real emulsified broth holds together. Engineered broth separates like salad dressing. Second test. Let a portion of the noodles sit in the broth for 2 to 3 minutes past the recommended cooking time. With cheap palm oil fried noodles collapse fast. They go soft, then mushy, then they start to disintegrate. Air-dried noodles, the hallmark of higher quality processing, hold their structural integrity significantly longer. Third test. Look at the first 5 ingredients on the label. If you see maltodextrin in the first 5, you are looking at a product built primarily on bulking agents. If you see natural flavors without any disclosed protein source, that is the legal placeholder for the flavor reconstruction system. If you see 2 or more separate flavor enhancer codes, E621, E627, E631, you are not looking at a broth. You are looking at an engineered umami stack. Fourth test, pour the finished broth into a clear glass. If you see a thick, cloudy oil slick sitting on top, that is your palm oil and flavor oil system made visible. Minimal surface oil is a better sign. Not perfect, but meaningfully better. This is not about eliminating ramen from your life. This is about knowing what kind of ramen you are actually purchasing with your money. The real list. Now here is where this investigation starts to feel worth doing. Because there are brands, not many, but they exist, that chose a different model. They compete on quality and transparency rather than on how effectively they can simulate quality while spending nothing on it. Brand 1, Sun Noodle. Sun Noodle started not as a retail product but as a supplier. They were founded to produce fresh noodles for authentic ramen shops, restaurants whose reputations depended on the product being real. That origin story matters because it set the engineering standards in the opposite direction from every brand we just covered. Sun Noodle produces fresh, non-fried noodles. Their broth concentrates are built on real ingredient bases. Their ingredient lists are shorter because they are not requiring a dozen separate flavor compounds to simulate what a real ingredient already provides, and they cost more. That is the honest trade-off. But you are paying for something that actually exists. Brand 2, Myojo, premium lines. The key difference here is in how they remove water from the noodle. Myojo's premium products use low-temperature air drying rather than deep frying in palm oil. That single process difference changes the product structurally. Lower fat content, better texture integrity, a noodle that responds more like fresh pasta and less like a compressed fried block. Japanese ramen culture takes noodle texture seriously because texture is a core part of how the dish functions on the palate. Myojo's premium line preserves that principle in a packaged format. Brand 3, Hakubaku. Hakubaku's competitive advantage is restraint. They focus on traditional grain processing and shorter ingredient lists, which means fewer artificial additives, fewer flavor reconstruction compounds, and a product that gets closer to tasting like what it claims to be. In a market where competitors are adding layers of complexity to mask absence, Hakubaku competes by removing the layers and relying on the base ingredient to do the work. They are often priced comparably to mid-tier conventional brands, which makes them one of the most strategically sound switches a consumer can make. Brand 4, Momofuku. This is the brand that most directly confronts the premium instant ramen opportunity. Momofuku, the restaurant group's packaged product line, is built explicitly on the premise that packaged ramen does not have to be a simulation. They use air-dried noodles. They build their seasoning systems around real ingredient bases. Their labeling is transparent in a category where transparency is almost economically irrational. You pay more, significantly more in some cases. But what you are paying for is a genuine attempt to close the gap between packaged and restaurant, rather than an attempt to convince you the gap does not exist. Brand 5, Imi. Imi sits slightly outside the traditional ramen category, and that is worth acknowledging. It is a modern reformulation, rarer, built with better macronutrient profiles and cleaner ingredient lists rather than adherence to traditional method. There is no monosodium glutamate. There are no artificial flavor enhancers. The trade-off is that it does not taste identical to traditional ramen because it is not pretending to be. It is a different product solving a different problem. And in a category where the standard move is to use every engineering shortcut available, the decision to avoid them is notable regardless of the category positioning. Here is what this audit comes down to. Instant ramen is not inherently the problem. The problem is a $50 billion industry that discovered it is more profitable to engineer the impression of quality than to produce quality, and then built a global regulatory framework to make that completely legal. Flavor enhancers in place of broth, fried noodles in place of properly dried ones. Natural flavors standing in for everything they cannot afford to actually put in the packet. This is the pattern. And now that you have seen it laid out ingredient by ingredient, you cannot look at the shelf the same way. The brands doing it right exist. They are harder to find. They cost more. And they will not take out a 30-second ad to tell you why. Because companies that compete on real ingredients are too busy sourcing them. Your money is a decision. Every time you reach for a packet, you are casing a vote for the kind of food system you want to fund. That is not a moral lecture. That is just the math. This is tasted and tested. We follow the food trail because you have the right to know what is actually in the food you are paying for. If this investigation changed how you read a label, share it with someone who deserves to know. Subscribe for more, because we are just getting started.